Hello, and welcome to episode 58 of Gondor Calls for Ale, a Middle-earth strategy battle games podcast. I am, of course, your host, Sam Gallagher, and with me, as always, is my brother Ben.
Hello, welcome to the show.
Welcome back, welcome back. You have, of course, heard us 2 weeks ago, or maybe this is your very first time. So sit back, enjoy our waffling. I have no idea where we're going with this, Ben. I had a smooth thing planned, but it did not pan out. Anyway, so we're just going to abruptly move on from our little introduction. If this is your first time, welcome. If it's not, thank you for returning. And speaking of returning, Ben, here we go. We're doing it slightly better now. I think it's time to return into the best segment of Gondor Calls for Ale, and that is, of course, the calling for ale, Ben. So I call for you to tell me what you are drinking this fine evening.
Well, Sam, for this episode, I have myself an extra special beer. I have myself a Shadowfax Stout, a beer that goes down so smoothly it will indeed show us the true meaning of haste.
Ah, very good, very good. Would you say it's the Lord of Stouts?
I would indeed, Sam. It is
brewed in the morning of the world or something like that.
Yes,
right?
yes. This is in fact one of the Miras beers, unless I mistake. Yes, that's my elf eyes deceive me. In fact.
Very good.
Well, Sam, so I'm having a mythical and delicious beer for this episode. What are you? I will call on you for some ale. What are you drinking this episode?
Well, Ben, I am having myself a Denethor Dark Ale, which, as we all know, you must drink for your lives!
You undersold me that, Sam. You were like, I just came up with this 10 minutes ago. It's not going to be very good. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Drink for your lives, indeed. Well done. Well done, sir.
And of course, it pairs perfectly with cherry tomatoes.
Yes, and chicken bits and a hobbit warbling in the background.
Yes. All right, Ben. That's what we're drinking. So anyone who cares may now end the episode. You've heard all that truly matters.
You've had all the good bits.
So on to the less good bits, Ben, and that is, of course, what are we talking about in this episode? I don't actually remember. I know what we're talking about. I don't remember the name of the event, where it was, or any of those details, apart from that it was a 1,000-point event, and it was... Oh, it's coming back to me. It was a 1,000-point event, 3 games, 1 day, Historicon, which is somewhere in Pennsylvania, run by Big Al himself, the two-time... two-time Adepticon champion, Alisha, excellent player, and runs a lot of the events in the Pennsylvania, Philadelphia specifically area. And this was an event that you attended solo.
Yeah, and I've got to stop going to these events solo. The last one I went to solo, Sam, as we talked about in the last episode, I got there, I was like in the right parking lot but couldn't find the store, and I'm sure if I like just had my I don't know, I'm sometimes I can't see something when it's right in front of me, and the logo was just like right there, and I was wandering around the parking lot, couldn't find the store. And this time I read the event packet, it said no pre-registration necessary, which meant I was like, great, cool, just going to show up and go. But obviously when it says no pre-registration necessary, it implied there is registration required. So I showed up with, I thought, plenty of time, and then had to get a badge for a convention, which I hadn't pre-registered for. And was still, only, I think I arrived on time,
Nice.
round, as the tables were being declared, I walked through the door. So I got to stop going to these things alone, Sam, because I'm too disorganized. The next one, I'm surely going to go to the wrong place.
Excellent. Well, Ben, you cannot beat the driving to the entirely wrong city, as we both did last summer. So, it's all still coming up, Ben. So not a big deal, but you got there. And we're excited to hear some more 1,000-point games. I assume.
Yes.
Oh, I assume we're excited, but who?
Oh yes, we're excited, Sam. We're excited. So this is, as Sam said, 1,000 points, and the idea is again to test some army lists for Nova. So if you listen to our last episode, you've heard that I've been playing with Gandalf the White, and I have tweaked my army list just a little bit. It is very similar from the last list that I took. We have an army leader of Denethor in his warband. We've got 4 guards of the Fountain Court with shields, 5 rangers of Gondor with spears, 5 warriors of Minas Tirith with shield, and 1 warrior of Minas Tirith with shield and banner. Next up, we've got Gandalf the White on Shadowfax with 6 warriors of Minas Tirith with shield, 4 warriors of Minas Tirith with spear and shield, and 5 rangers of Gondor with spear. Then we've got Madril, captain of Ithilien, with 5 warriors of Minas Tirith with shields, 2 warriors of Minas Tirith with spear and shield, and 4 rangers of Gondor. Then we have Theodred, heir of Rohan, on horse with shield, Eomer, marshal of the Riddermark, on horse with shield, and Dernhelm, for a total of 48 models, 15 bows, and 15 might.
All right. Of course, if you are unfamiliar, the reason, I guess, Gandalf and Denethor and some of those other heroes share a heroic tier, so you could get to choose, but Denethor has to be the army leader if he is included in the army. So
yeah, absolutely. And if you listen to our last episode, the only real change here is I've taken the throwing spears off of the Rohan heroes and used those points to upgrade a couple of warriors of Minas Tirith with shield into Guard of the Fountain Court.
All right.
But other than that, it's essentially the same army list.
All right, very good, very good. Shall we get into it? Is there anything else you wish to say about this list before we move on and hear how it performs?
No, let's dive right on into it, Sam. For round 1, I was playing against Caleb, and we were playing Heirlooms of Ages Past.
All right. That's my turn now. I was just
your
ready to
turn.
listen. Heirlooms of Ages Past, which is of course a scenario from the Match Play Guide, which I have handily on my phone, and it's one of a lot of reading. Here we go, Ben.
It is the most reading scenario.
Some say that the starting positions are irrelevant because it's a Maelstrom mission. If you're viewing it, you can see there's a little Maelstrom map where you roll a dice and things happen. So we're going to get into some special rules first because they become rather relevant for the scoring. So, Ben, we have, of course, I should say, we play 6 objectives. Players take it in turns to play 6 objectives. So you roll a dice, whoever rolls first plays the first one, place them, and they have to be outside of 12 inches of each other and 6 of a board edge, if I remember that correctly. And so we have the relic, Ben, and those are, of course, relics. We have uncovering the relic. Only one objective of the objective markers is actually the relic that both sides seek. The first time each turn an unengaged infantry model ends its move in base contact with an objective, they may attempt to search it to uncover the relic. When this happens, roll a d6. On the roll of a 6, the relic has been discovered, and the model that has discovered takes possession of it. Might cannot be used to influence this roll. If the roll is a 1 through 5, the relic is not there. Remove the objective from play. The first 5 objective markers to be searched. If the first 5 objective markers to be searched do not reveal the relic, then the last one automatically is the relic. No roll is required. We've got the Relic of Power. The relic is treated as a light object, however, the dark powers that lie upon it may seep into the mind of its holder. Unwilling to give it up, models carrying the relic may not drop it or pass it to another model. Additionally, at the start of each turn, before rolling priority, roll a d6. On a 1, the model is transfixed. May not be used to modify this roll. And then, of course, we have Maelstrom of Battle. Alright, so we've now got scoring. You score 6 points if your force is in possession of the relic at the end of the game. If at the end of the game you are not in possession of the relic but have more models within 3 inches of the relic than your opponent, instead you score 3. You score 1 victory point for causing 1 or more wounds to the enemy leader. If you kill them, instead you score 2. You score 1 victory point if the enemy force is broken. If the enemy force is broken and your force is unbroken, instead you score 2. You score 1 victory point for having at least 1 banner. If you have at least 1 banner and your opponent has none, instead you score 2. There we go. Heirlooms of Ages Past.
Indeed, Sam. And my opponent Caleb had a similar list to mine. He also had Denethor. Next he had Boromir and Madril. And then for his allied contingent, he had Radagast the Brown. Radagast the Bird Tamer even, for he was on an eagle.
Radagast the Fool.
Radagast the Fool, indeed. Radagast had an unfortunate game, which we will get into. And finally, we've got Galadriel, Lady of Light.
And it was is Boromir with the banner.
Boromir, Captain of the White Tower. Yep, absolutely. And as you mentioned, Sam, this was a veto tournament, and I got to veto second, and I decided to play Heirlooms of Ages Past because I didn't feel like trying to decide which scenario was better for me. I decided, you know what, it's a really swingy scenario, let's just play the swingy scenario, and that way I don't have to worry about choosing the better scenario. We'll just play the swingy one. So we went in for Heirlooms of Ages Past, and I took turn 1 priority, Sam. So Madril, being a master of ambush, he's got a special rule. Once he's on the table, he can adjust the die rolls of other heroes' Maelstrom rolls by 1 up or down as he sees fit, which makes it very important to get him on the table, and you can get your army where you need it in Maelstrom. So And I should say, too, very importantly, that when it came down to placing the objectives, we were playing on this ice table. I don't want to spoil a surprise before I get into the pictures of the table. We'll get into the pictures of the game in just a minute. We were playing on this ice table, and there were a couple of like icy hills that would be climb tests for models to get up to. So Caleb was putting a couple of his objectives on top of these hills because he's got a flying eagle. Why not? The eagle's an infantry model. It can drop down, dig up the relic. So I made sure that the two relics that I placed were each within 6 inches of the north board edge and then 6 inches of the eastern board edge, so that no matter what I rolled, I had an opportunity to just move right onto a relic on turn 1.
Sure.
So I take turn 1 priority, not necessarily something you want on a Maelstrom mission, and I roll with Madril, and he gets a 2 for his Maelstrom roll. So he spends a point of might and his own Master of Ambush ability to make it a 4 and come in on the northern board edge, and he walks up to that relic, Sam. And I picked up my dice, my trusty Baron of Dice, Sam, for the Baron, and I rolled that dice, and the Baron was with me, for I threw a 6, and Madril uncovered the relic on his first turn. I was using these very special Ministerith War for the One ring dice available on the Baron of Dice website. Beautifully hand-swirled resin with nice square corners and no micro bubbles, meaning that we can guarantee that at least some of the time you will roll 6s, and this time I did indeed roll a 6, Sam. And if you too, dear listener or viewer, would like to pick yourself up this set of sweet Baron of Dice or another one just like them, you can find them on his website. The link is in the description of this video or episode below. And go ahead and use our promo code, which is capital G, capital C, capital A, to get yourself a sweet discount. Helps out the Baron, and let the good times roll, because for my dice, Sam, I trust the Baron.
Excellent. And he, as you said, was certainly with you in this role.
Absolutely.
Always fun. I always roll I always search for the relics, because I think that's how the game is intended to be played, even though it plays into the other way, which is what people quite often do, which is just pick one relic. They're going to be like, this will be the last one I roll for. And then you play a game of chicken where you're each like, I'm not going to roll for this. Are you going to roll for it? I'm not going to roll for it. So.
Yeah. I felt a little bad because I was doing this goofy thing where I had 2 dice in my hand because I wanted them to clack together, because dice roll better when you clack them together.
Sure.
And my opponent Caleb was like, no, it's just 1 dice. I'm like, yeah, I'm just rolling 2 together to make the noise because they roll better, and then threw the 6. So I felt like a bit of an ass, but anyway.
I mean, as long as you're not like, I'm rolling the blue ones, the search for the relic dice, and the green ones not, and you roll them both like that, I would be like, no, fuck off. But if you're just
I mean, and he was not at all bent out of shape about it. It was mostly just that I had said like dice roll better when you roll them together, and then through the 6.
They also roll better when they're weighted. Don't worry about it.
So Madril moves on, picks up the relic. That's fantastic. We go for Gandalf next. Gandalf gets a 5 with Madril's Master of Ambush special rule, becomes a 6. Gandalf can move on wherever he wants. He rides onto the board, and because I'm facing 2 magic users across the table, although neither of them really have offensive magic, we weren't taking any chances. No ifs, buts, or coconuts. We threw a Fortified Spirit using 1 of Gandalf's will points and 1 for free onto Madril, so Madril himself is now fortified against other magics. Denethor also gets a 5, as do Theodred and Eomer, both moving onto the board. Dernhelm, however, rolls a 2 and elects not to spend any of her own resources. I think this was possibly a mistake, but I was feeling bad. I was feeling like it was my game to lose, and I wanted to give my opponent a gimme, so I let him place Dernhelm. And if you're looking at this picture, Dernhelm is the cavalry model all the way on the other side of the board there, all by herself, riding across the board. But she's not a model I mind losing, because when she dies, Eomer's now got +1 to wounds. So,
sure, yeah.
Hopefully she can at least drag some resources off my opponent while she goes down swinging, is what I was hoping. Which is exactly what she did, because turn 2 goes to me. So Madril decides to call a heroic move. I should say, too, that as Caleb moved his army on, Galadriel puts Fortified Spirit on herself, and Madril's warband, the Rangers, move half distance, and they all unload all of their shots into Dernhelm, and to no effect. So I take turn 2 priority.
I think
Madril calls a move.
I think we're going to need to, as we move on, Ben, we're going to need to specify whether this is your Madril or Caleb's Madril.
Yes, we will. So this is Caleb's Madril calling a move, and Merry answers with a counter move, which goes to me, and Merry and Dernhelm just ride away. Unfortunately, I wasn't really thinking about where they were riding to. They were just riding away, and they are still within charge range of Radagast and his eagle. So the Radagast and the eagle go charging on into combat with Dernhelm. Galadriel puts another Fortified Spirit, this time on herself, and in the combat phase, Eowyn strikes. Radagast doesn't have strike. The fight goes to goes to me, and we pull a wound off a Radagast. So far, Dernhelm has spent 2 points of might, taken a wound off a Radagast, and used up a point of Madril's might. So far, so good. Turn 3 goes to me. And, there she is, all by herself. Turn 3 goes to me. Caleb decides not to call anything. He is, at this point, moving forwards. And probably I should have just been running away from him all game, if I'm entirely honest. Because, numbers-wise, his army is about equal to mine. But with Boromir's banner, he has the high fight.
Mm-hmm.
But I picked what I decided was a fairly defensible fortification area. There's some nice choke points, and there was a little barrier that I could maybe defend and get defending the obstacle bonus. So once again, in the combat phase, Dernhelm strikes up using her last point of might. She wins the fight against Radagast. Because I had priority, there were 2 warriors of Minas Tirith that had been moving up to support Radagast. If Caleb had gone first, I would have been trapped. I was able to charge it in such a way that she wasn't trapped this turn. That was pretty great. So she wins the fight, takes another wound and another point of fate off a Radagast. Caleb finally wins a priority. Dernhelm is out of might and is slain this turn. But that's okay. She's done her job. She's eaten a couple of heroic stats off a Radagast, 1 point of might off a Madril. That's all okay.
Meanwhile, interest in this picture, did when Caleb wins the priority, does he charge with Radagast into Dernhelm?
Yes.
Was there any
Radagast
way
and 2 warriors of Minas Tirith? So this is a turn later.
Because it looks like you could have moved Gandalf up, got a Sorcerer's Blast, and blasted somebody into that combat and knocked Radagast off his eagle.
Yeah. So the actual combat, if you look at that hill in the... I'm going to go back a slide. See this hill that's behind the eagle right now?
Uh-huh.
The actual combat happens behind that hill. So this is the turn where I win the move off against Madril. Madril's just called a move here. Caleb's Madril. Dernhelm calls a move and moves backwards behind this hill and then gets charged by the eagle. So the whole fight is happening in the corner of the board. So this next picture is about 3 turns or 2 turns on, I think, when Radagast is caught back up to the army.
I guess I was. Oh yeah, I was looking at Boromir and it looked like I don't know why Dernhelm's in the middle of his
It's
whole arm.
funny you should say that too, because I took this picture and then was like, "Hey, you done moving?" And Caleb was like, "Wait, nope." He moved Boromir last, and Boromir didn't spend the turn there for the exact reason that you're thinking of, Sam. Because I was preparing a Sorcerer's Blast from Gandalf, so it's one of those moments where I took the picture. We didn't get to Sorcerer's Blast Boromir this turn.
Oh, I would have Sorcerer's Blasted the eagle first.
Yeah, that's
100
fair.
points, just poof.
Oh no, it stays. If Radagast dismounts the eagle, or it's got the equivalent of Azog's Warg special rule, it passes the courage test.
Huh.
Which is it's a good thing. It's a good thing to know.
That is a good thing to know. All right, proceed. I'm done asking my dumb questions.
Yeah. So meanwhile, while Dernhelm's been battering into Radagast, Gandalf has been throwing Fortify Spirits on himself. No, I don't think I put one on himself, actually. I ended up putting a Strengthened Will on himself because I decided I didn't need it. Because there's no Your Staff is Broken or anything like that. But he did put Fortify Spirit on Theodred and Eomer as well. And so over the next couple of turns, we just get some maneuvering, right? We've both Fortified Spirited all our heroes. I took a Sorcerer's Blast at Denethor, which didn't go off. I did pull 2 points of will off of him, but because Boromir is on the table, Caleb's Denethor does not have to take the Insanity test every single turn. And after that, he basically wised up and left Denethor a little further back.
Mm-hmm.
So we get into some later turns. The lines are pushing forwards. We're both firing into Blinding Light. No one's really getting ahead on kills. I think we maybe both took a shooting casualty each. But importantly, right before combat locks, it may even be on the turn that the battle lines actually clash, is I decided to shoot every single one of my bows into Radagast through the Blinding Light. I've got 15 bow shots. One of them's Madril. And I was like, screw it, we hit on 6s. I think I got 3 hits. All of them hit Radagast. And we take another wound off of him and is remaining on another point of fate. So he's now down to 1 wound, 1 fate. And Caleb has to dismount him. Which is really, really big because the Eagles' role in this game becomes like I've got Madril and Denethor like hiding behind my battle lines, right? All my victory points in one basket, leader kill and the relic. And Radagast on the Eagle, he's still sitting on might. He's not got strike, but he's a monstrous thing with might and fly. He could have been a real threat to my relic bearer, but now the fact that Radagast is basically forced to dismount and hide behind the battle lines was pretty fantastic.
Right, and he's forced to dismount because there are no in the ways for shooting at a flying monster.
Exactly. And like I said, I believe it was actually a turn before this one. So the eagle's in combat here in this next picture, but it was like the battle lines, we were already in combat, and some of my rangers were spear supporting, but all of the ones that weren't just gunned into Radagast on the eagle. A very satisfying move. So we get into the combats. The battle lines actually lock. I don't know if you can see here, Sam, there's a little ice wall in there, so I've got some of my guys defending. And I think this is definitely where the game starts to slip away from me. So at this point, I've got this eagle getting ready to do a hurl down my battle line. Fortunately, in this particular turn, I believe this is turn 7. I've won priority, so I get to call which combats go first, and we do the eagle last in this situation, so that it's not hurling down my battle line, and then I'm taking all the penalties. I do end up taking a couple of casualties on the first turn of combat. I believe about 3. And Theodred was not able to get a charge off this turn. He's just out of combat range here, and is almost shot of his horse. Has to spend his only point of fate on Horse Lord to stay on his horse. So I take turn 8 priority. And Theodred charges through my battle lines, and then I closed up ranks behind him, and I think I made a mistake here. I should have pushed my battle lines forwards, because you can see what happens is he just gets surrounded. And, Theodred's Theodred. That's what he does. He's a hand grenade. You throw him in, and you just do as much damage as you can. But getting surrounded on your first charge is not great, especially when one of them is a 5/6 elf. Now, she doesn't have an elven blade, because she's unarmed, but even so, I have to strike here, which is not what we want. Éomer decides to charge into the eagle. We've got to take care of that. It can't be hurling down my battle line, and it's still a big threat to Madril. If that eagle comes and gets an opportunity to fly into Madril, Boromir calls a move or something, Madril is toast, and I'm losing the relic to an eagle, which is bad news. So in the combat phase, we get a strike off between Theodred and Galadriel. The strike off goes to Galadriel, and Theodred is slain this turn. Éomer strikes against the eagle and kills the eagle in response, which, is a bit rough to lose Theodred like that. I still like my position, although I do think if you look here, the mistake that I've made now is I can't get Éomer back into combat. My battle lines I've essentially sealed off my mounted heroes in the back. Gandalf doesn't mind that. He doesn't want to be in combat and as the battle lines lock. I like to use him in combat later game, but right now I've trapped Éomer behind my battle lines, which is not great. No casualties this turn. At least I didn't mark down any casualties, which must be wrong. I must have taken a few casualties in this turn. We get to turn 9 priority, where I once again win priority, and the battle lines lock. The clock is running low, and it's Boromir's turn, Sam. Boromir calls a heroic combat, kills 2 of the warriors he's fighting, moves into the second line, and kills another 2 warriors this turn. So Boromir is breaking through. Meanwhile, Galadriel, having taken care of Theodred, goes into my battle lines, and she also calls a heroic combat. No, tell a lie. No, yeah, she also calls a heroic combat this turn, and is also forcing her way through my battle lines. However, next turn, priority goes to Caleb, and my Madril calls a move, which is answered by his Madril, and Caleb goes first. So he gets to engage. Galadriel is forcing her way through. Boromir is basically through my battle lines at this point, but that's okay, Sam, because I have a wizard. So he's finished his move. We've gotten, he was a really great opponent. We both gave each other a lot of takesy-backsies early games, but then we got to the point in this game where it was like, okay, and both of us were like, hey, I've made a mistake. That was a mistake, but we're here to learn. We're here to play. So he finished his moves, and he's left a warrior, a ranger right within range of me to Sorcerer's Blast him right into Boromir's combat, which is exactly what we do. We Sorcerer's Blast the ranger into combat, kills the ranger, knocks Boromir off of his horse, and in the combat phase, and then Gandalf finishes his move, and charges right on into Boromir. And then Éomer is right nearby and calls a heroic combat in the combat phase. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, I don't know. At this point, it didn't really matter. I had to dismount Éomer to get him into Boromir. If you look here, there's a Fountain Court who is unengaged, fighting, he's spear supporting just behind Boromir, and there's just not enough room for Éomer as a cavalry base to get to Boromir and not enter that Fountain Court's control zone. So Éomer dismounts, charges into Boromir, and Boromir has called a heroic defense in response to my strike in combat.
Did he roll the 6 for the dismount? I don't think you can use active abilities or call heroic actions if you've been thrown from
You
a
can
fall.
call actions if you rolled a 1 on the Throne Rider chart. Double check me. I thought so too. But it is worth noting that since Boromir was knocked down, we were back to none of his warriors were getting
Right.
the fight bonus from the banner, and Boromir was down to fight 6. Which Caleb, I had completely forgotten that, but Caleb pointed that out to me. But I believe it's like you can't do anything except call heroic actions is like one of the only things you can do on a 1 from the Throne Rider chart.
So, but he did roll the 1.
Well, you're not flying from Sorcerer's Blast.
Oh, true. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Well, continue. I will.
Continue. So in the game, regardless of whether it's actually correct or not, Boromir calls a heroic defense, which is enough to stop me killing him. And at this point, AMA had to spend. He struck to wound the eagle, to strike higher than the eagle, which is fight 7 or 8, and he had to spend a point of might to actually finish killing the eagle. So this heroic combat that he's called is his last point of might. It's now Gandalf's second point of might because I channeled Blinding Light early on in the game. So I am actually running low on might. I'm down to 1 on Madril at this point. Theodored's dead, Éomer is out, and Gandalf is down to 1. So I almost think I should have. I don't know. Anyway, it didn't turn out to be a great exchange because Boromir is still sitting on 4 might. He's just called a heroic defense. He's lost 1 wound, still sitting on 3 points of fate. And from this point on, Caleb proceeds to win every single priority, and I'm sitting on maybe 1 might. And I call 1 move, but essentially from here on in, he's able to push his way through my battle lines. Galadriel was just unstoppable. The next turn after the one I just described, turn 10, Boromir is able to trap Gandalf and take a point of fate off of him. The next turn, Gandalf gets trapped again and is killed. Meanwhile, Galadriel is just chopping her way through my battle lines, finally makes her way to Madril, and takes a first wound onto Madril. So I move Denethor up. We throw Denethor up there because it's like all our eggs are in one basket. We got to. And at this point, he's a fight 5 2-attack warrior. So if he takes a wound, that's bad. But at this point, you can see there's a lot of warriors of Minas Tirith from both sides. But the battle lines are in complete disarray, and I just need to win a priority. We get all the way to turn 14, where I finally win a priority, and Boromir spends his last point of might to call the move, which is the clutch move. Galadriel is able to get into Madril. Boromir goes to go beat down on his dad, and Galadriel slays Madril on the 14th turn of the game. Final turn of the game. Galadriel kills Madril, and Boromir puts but a single wound on dear old dad. We were joking about how Boromir was just going to obliterate him, and then he's like, I love you, Dad, and just whiffed his wound roll and only got 1 wound. So I lost this one 9-1. A really fantastic game. I do felt like I gave it away a little bit, but super fun either way.
Yeah. Well, glad it was a fun game.
Yeah.
I mean, you had the relic, so yeah, probably given away a little bit. Especially, I didn't register. This actually illustrates it. If you're viewing, you can see the model Caleb is using is just regular old Galadriel, not the Lady of Light. And you said Lady of Light, and I didn't register that that's the Sea Witch version of her. Which then makes sense as to why he's got Radagast, because you have to have Radagast to bring Galadriel and a pile of yellow allies. So
he had the other model. She just wasn't painted, and I was like, whichever one you want to use.
No, I mean, fair enough. It just, but it just changes what you do because she doesn't have compel or transfix or like any spells like that. So what I would have considered doing, right, is like you said, is you sit. You like sit, wait for him to come for you, and wait until he's like, when he's at a point where he's 6 inches away, you back up like, I don't know, until he's 10, and then call a march, and you're just like, wee,
Yeah, I absolutely should have. I should have just been like, the second I picked up my relic, I was just waiting there, taking shots into Blinding Light. I should have just been running away.
Yeah.
Move the whole battle line 3 inches and take shots the whole time.
I still think
because I did get broken, but this game does end on time. Understandably, like it's an heirlooms game, it's 1,000 points.
Yeah,
it went to time.
I think it's fine to take a couple of turns of shooting. I just think because then you can also kind of draw them in, and then rather than being like, look, I'm all the way over here, and then they're gonna start trying to net you, or like if you can be like, hold, retreat en masse now. It's going to be harder to get, especially if you can separate Radagast from the Eagle with either a Sorcerer's Blast or, as you did with shooting, then you're just 1-2 dice transfix on that eagle as soon, so it's never gonna. Or even if it dives, you wait. Even if it dives on Madril, then you transfix it and hit it with all of your striking heroes and just.
I did actually the turn I charged the eagle. I did try to transfix it. It gets magic resistance.
Within a range of Radagast or something.
Yeah, or they come. The eagle's just I don't know, but it's got magic resistance. And he rolled a 6 to resist the transfix. Which I like rolled the 4 and was standing there debating spending might on it, which it would have been a terrible expenditure of might, so it's for the best that Caleb just like grabbed the dice and rolled it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also have an answer to the not flying thing. It is FAQ'd because it says may do nothing and then lists it and doesn't specifically say heroic actions, but then in an FAQ it says you can still call heroic actions, which is a bit of a bitch, but.
Gotcha.
Now I'm going to check if it does get magic resistance, because I don't think it does.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like you said, the second the eagle died, and by that point, like, our battle lines are locked, and I've got my battle line anchored by 2 terrain features. The only way he's getting through me is cutting through me.
Yeah.
The second the eagle died, Madril and Denethor should have just been running.
Yeah.
And then just let's just fight it out in the middle, let him break me. Because that's basically, we were even numbers, and he's got the high fight, and just inevitably, I think when I was taking casualties, I'd get like 1 or 2 kills a turn, and he'd get 3 or 4. And so he was just basically grinding me down.
Yeah, it is, just so you know for the future, because it wouldn't have mattered in this game because he did it correctly, it is within 12 inches of Radagast, the eagle gets resistant to magic.
Gotcha. Nice. Yeah, we did have a question with the answer to which is no, is Galadriel cast Fortify Spirit on the eagle and Radagast. Which one of them keeps Fortify Spirit when they separate? Which is an interesting question. Obviously, it's Radagast, but you don't even get to choose. You can't be like, I put Shroud of Shadows on Azog and the White Warg. They dismount the White Warg is still shrouded. It's like no, it's just Azog.
Sure. Is Fortify Spirit on hero models only?
Nope.
So he could
pick a target within range and
done it later if he wanted.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's actually something I've been thinking about in the context of Easterlings and Gandalf the White, because Brogir's Tremor seems to be pretty scary, but you could, like, the turn, you see when your opponent's setting it up, Brogir comes around your flank and Tremor's down the flank.
Yeah.
Anyone under the line can resist, so you just pick, like, Joshmo Warrior and just, like, throw a Fortify Spirit on him.
Yeah.
Thinking ahead to the other things. Anyway, Sam, onwards into my next game, I think.
Yeah.
I was playing against Ken, and we were playing To the Death.
Excellent. To the Death. It's my turn to once again read things, Ben. Would you say he was just Ken, and anywhere else he would have been a 10?
I don't know, Sam. Maybe. I think Ken was fairly new to the Lord of the Rings. I think he was maybe a 40k player, and maybe a 10 40k player there. I couldn't tell you.
What did you say?
I'm just guessing from how he moved his army around.
To the Death, that's what we're playing?
To the Death, Scenario 2.
Scenario 2. If you're viewing, you can see these beautiful 12-inch up deployment zones. If you're listening, you now know that they're beautiful 12-inch up deployment zones. We have objectives. The game lasts until a force has been reduced to 25% of its starting number. We've got scoring. You score 1 victory point for causing 1 or more wounds to the enemy leader. If you kill them, instead you score 3. You score 3 victory points if the enemy force is broken. And if your force is unbroken, instead you score 5. You score 1 victory point for having at least 1 banner. If you have 1 banner and your opponent scores none, you score 2. You score 2 victory points if the enemy force is reduced to 25% of its starting number. To the Death. Nice and simple.
All right. So I'm going to run through this fairly quickly because Ken was a very new player. And he was playing Thranduil's Halls.
Okay.
So for his army leader, he's got Thranduil. Hero number 2 is Toriel, who we show here, and he painted his army. They were absolutely gorgeous.
Lovely.
I think he did a lovely job on them. I voted for him for best painted good army for the event. For his other 2 heroes, he had a Ranger captain and just a Mirkwood captain. So 2 captains.
Sure.
Which I think army composition wise was a bit of a mistake. And he also hadn't paid for war gear upgrades on any of his elves, so they were just rocking hand weapon. Like the Rangers come with Ranger stuff, but all the Mirkwood elves are they don't have shields, they don't have glaives.
Yeah.
They're just elves. And he's got 4 warbands. He ended up picking table sides and deploying first. So he deploys the warband, all the way. He deploys his Mirkwood Rangers with Toriel all the way on that flank there on my left, and I put down like Durnhelm behind a building, and then he deploys his next warband. I deployed all of my Rohan heroes, and then he deployed his entire army, and he split his army into two, which I think was a bit of a mistake. Because I basically put all of my army on one flank, and he's got his two armies on the extreme flank, and he's got something like 33 bow shots. Dang. And this table is fairly open. There's some houses for me to hide behind, but he should have put his. I mean, we talked about it after the game, but he should have put his Mirkwood Rangers in a big clump in the middle of the board, in the middle of his deployment zone, and he'd have had firing lanes down the whole board. As it is, he's got Thranduil and Toriel on one flank, and the two captains on the other flank. So I put my whole army where the two captains are, and I proceed to call a march with Madril, and we just rush forwards. I've managed to completely mitigate his shooting with blinding light. And basically my goal here is to try and do enough damage to these two warbands that I then don't have to worry about the other two warbands. Which is essentially what happens. I should also note that the banner isn't in Thranduil's warband. The banner is in the warband with the Mirkwood captain, and he had it deployed behind his battle lines. So I did dirty wizard tricks and sorceress blasted the banner bearer and killed him while there was no one in combat with him. Just to make sure that I was getting those banner points, because we're here to play, we're here to win, and I wanted to make sure that I was winning. At some point, at about this point in the game, I realized he was a very new player, and I was like, and on top of that, he wasn't rolling well. So he's got a suboptimal army list. He's a very new player. His elves, when I was fighting him, is like I've got 3 to 4 guys, two to four guys in each fight, and he's got 1 dice. So I just won all the fights, killed all of his elves on that flank. Theodred charges into his Palace Guard captain or his Wood Elf captain, kills the captain on that flank. The Rangers are running away. My Rangers are hiding in blinding light. And at some point, I've killed, like, I'm close to breaking him and haven't lost a model yet. And Thranduil is still walking across the board. And I'm like, hey, look, I called a march. It got me across the board over here. Like, you've got another captain over here. He could call a march. Do you want to do anything? And he was like, no, I want to save my might. I want to save my might. And this game was just so one-sided that there's not a whole lot I really want to say about it, other than that I took a little bit of mercy on him in that I could have killed Thranduil, because about halfway through the game, Gandalf is riding around with nothing to do. My Rohan heroes are chopping through the Rangers. My battle line is mopping up these Mirkwood elves, and Thranduil is walking across the board. And I could have just been throwing transfixes commands at him, sapping his will, and then once he's got no will left, we transfix him and we throw the Rohan heroes into him, and it would have been a 12-0. As it was, what I did is I just made sure that none of my important heroes were going to fight Thranduil, and that I was just going to feed a couple of Rohan warriors and eventually Durnhelm into Thranduil. So Thranduil got to kill some stuff, and I just chopped apart the rest of his army. And I won this one 9-0. It could very easily have been a 12-0. I just didn't see the point in putting the boot in, especially in a 3-game tournament where, like, I've already lost my first game with a major defeat. I didn't feel like I was coming into a strong spot to podium. So I decided it was more important that he have a positive game experience, because I mean, we both early on in our Lord of the Rings game career had a very negative gaming experience with some veteran players that didn't need to be like that. And I just wanted to make sure that I mean, I still don't think he had a fun time. I like wrote on my score sheet 9-0 with a little frowny face underneath it, because when you play a new player and you're like, they're not used to the pace of the game, so you start to call, like, okay, it's the shooting phase. Do you have any shots? Now it's the combat phase. Which combat do you want to do? So, like, I was basically DMing this game for him, and I was trying to get something out of him. Like, hey, man, like, and the fight was just out of him. He ended up winning no games. He was the wooden spoon player for this tournament.
That is an interesting discussion, or not discussion, but an interesting thing, because I would say that you did the right thing and don't absolutely pace the guy. I think in some way it's funny that you said it's a 3-game tournament, and you've already got a major defeat. So there's not much point. But I would in some ways I think that if you can, depending, obviously I don't know the numbers, but if you can 12-0 in a 3-game tournament. If you can get like 2 really high scoring games, and granted 9 is pretty good, but if you could go like 12-0 and then 12-0, I think you're like in a really good spot to potentially get second or third, depending how everyone else does, which is an interesting thing, because like in a 5-game tournament, I'd be more like, this is the second game, I've got a major defeat, 9-0 is still pretty good, I've got a major victory, we've got 3 more games coming at some point over this weekend, and so like we're going to sort of even out, and like a couple of 12-0s don't really matter. Whereas with only 1 game left, and you're like, there are going to be, let's say there are 20 people, you're just like suddenly going to be shooting way higher with the 12-0 versus a 9-0. Definitely don't think that like.
That's an interesting point.
Don't think that it really matters, and I would say that having somebody have a good time is more important. I do think that, like, for an example, if you wanted to do that, right, there are ways that you could play the game to potentially have more, to but like give him more opportunities for fun and like make it more of a game, but also still guarantee the 12-0.
Yeah,
like
I think
Grandurial, but like thrown up like 4 rangers into like keep putting more of your guys into his rangers, because then they're rolling like 3 or 4 dice and they have the high fight.
Yeah, I think I add a little bit, because my goal was, I figured out fairly early on, honestly, by the end of deployment, that he was new to the game, and was like, so my thought was like, I just want to get ahead, and then I'll let him play the game. And I think I just swung a little too hard into the I'm winning this game, by the time I pulled back, it was a little bit too late. And I mean, so I just assumed his warriors were WYSIWYG, but when like his battle lines locked, and he was like, oh, my elves don't have spears, my elves don't have shields, I was like, oh,
yeah, yeah.
But you're right. I definitely, looking back at it, it probably could have been better. I could have killed Thranduil and could have just fed guys in Toriel instead.
Right. But I would rather be suggesting ways that you could win more because you decided to make a game hopefully slightly more enjoyable for an opponent, because I think. Yeah. I think another topic for another episode is I think that is happening less in the game now, and I think like when we started, there was way more games. I was like, wow, this was a tournament. This was still really amazing, and I think that is probably less the case currently, which is a bummer.
I think you're sadly accurate there, Sam. I think you are.
Don't worry, if you want to hear Sam rage about this and complain and bitch at people or about people, there'll probably be a Patreon episode about it, so check out our Patreon. All right, I can tell by this deployment that you got a little retrieval going on for Game 3.
That's right, I surely do, Sam. We were once again vetoing, and I think I chose this one over Destroy the Supplies last time. The last time I played out of this pool with this army, I picked Destroy the Supplies over Retrieval. I decided that what I was going to do is my army splits in half actually quite nicely. You have all of the Minas Tirith force defending and the 3 Rohan heroes attacking.
Sure.
Which is what I decided to do. So, Sam, you want to give us a rundown of some retrieval?
I surely do. Scenario 14. If you're viewing, you can see the funny deployment zone. If you're listening, it is you cut the board diagonally in half, and then there's 3 inches off that center line either way. There's a little strip so it ends up being a 6-inch strip of no man land. From the corners, you put a relic 15 inches in, so it's into your deployment zone. And we get a relic. It says the relic on the screen. It's just an objective. Or is it?
No, it's the relic.
It is. So we get a game that lasts until 1 turn has been reduced to 50, has been broken, and then on a 1 or a 2 it may suddenly end. Before we move into scoring, we're going to talk about the special rules, which is the relic. Each relic is a light object. A relic is considered to have been retrieved at the end of the game if it's being carried by a friendly model. If a relic has been picked up by an enemy model and then is subsequently dropped or retaken by a friendly model, then a player must try to return it to its original position as quickly as possible. Until it has been picked up by an enemy model, friendly models cannot pick up their own relic. Then we get some scoring. You score 1 victory point if your opponent's relic has been moved from its original position at the end of the game. If you've retrieved your opponent's relic, instead you score 3 victory points. If you retrieve your opponent's relic and the model is holding it in your deployment zone, instead you score 5. If you've retrieved your opponent's relic and have managed to move it off the board via either of the board edges in your deployment zone, instead you score 7. You score 1 victory point for causing 1 or more wounds to the enemy leader. You get 2 if you kill them. You score 1 victory point if the enemy force is broken at the end of the game. If the enemy force is broken and your force is unbroken, instead you score 3. There we go, retrieval. Let's hear how it went.
All right, so I was playing against Paul, Sam, and it's interesting. In my first game, you mentioned that, of course, you have to bring Radagast to bring Lady of Light.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think about the White Council as a faction. Haven't really thought about them in the Alliance Matrix at all. Sort of didn't realize that Lady of Light was Fortitude, and I'm bringing this up because my opponent's army list is illegal. I was chatting with my friend Ian about it after the game, and I'll give you the army list. It's not actually a legal army list, but that's okay. It's not a power army list, so I don't feel too bad. So his army leader is King Elessa, with a full warband of warriors of Minas Tirith. Then we've got Hurin with a full warband of warriors of Minas Tirith and rangers of Gondor. Then we've got Thranduil, King of the Woodland Halls, on Elk. Mm-hmm. He's got 12 elves with him, 6 of them with shields, 6 of them with glaives. And then Galadriel, Lady of Light, which is, of course, the illegal inclusion. She is only a hero of Fortitude, and it's a Yellow Alliance.
I mean, I understand making that mistake because that is an FAQ. In the book, she's a hero of valor, but everyone and their mother was taking her for an extended period of time, so they made her a hero of Fortitude.
And like I said, particularly in this matchup, not too worried about it because she had nothing to do all game.
Yeah.
To the point where he was repeatedly casting Fortify Spirit because he didn't have anything onto Aragorn over and over again because he didn't have anything better to do, which was a bit odd. But at some point I was like, it remains in play, right? It's too exhausting. You don't have to keep casting it. And he was like, yeah, but I just want to roll dice with her. I was like, okay, whatever. You do you, man. Fair enough. She didn't have a lot to do. She was mostly loitering around providing blinding light. We were playing on this cool Khazad Doom board. And as you can see, Sam, I deployed, like I said I was going to. All of my Minas Tirith force is defending, and my 3 Rohan heroes are up on the line, ready to go wreak havoc. And my opponent, Paul, played very offensively. He left nobody behind to defend his relic. He was coming at me. I believe his elves were set back just a little bit. I think I stuffed my deployment up a little bit. My Rohan heroes ended up facing off against his elves, which was inevitable with how deployment went down, but I did have the opportunity to put 2 of them on the other side of the board. And I was like, 3 of them together, they'll just cut through that warband. That's fine. But if you have the opportunity to put 5 heroes against not fight 5 troops, you should do that.
Yeah.
It kind of turned into my heroes cancelling out his elves cancelling out my heroes, and they just fought each other to mutual annihilation. But we'll get into the nitty-gritty as we go. So I take turn 1 priority. And as you can see from this deployment zone, Sam, Thranduil is hiding behind his elves. He doesn't want to get shot off that elk, which is, of course, when you're facing a wizard, a mistake, because Gandalf on Speedy Shadowfax rides forwards on turn 1, spends 2 points of his own will from his store, 1 for free, to blast one of those elves backwards into Thranduil and takes him off the elk on turn 1. Yep. I can be ruthless. I can be merciful, Sam. I can also be quite ruthless. And this was so we killed an elf. We killed the elf. Sorcerer's Blast, and I shoot my whole battle line at him. Not all of his armies in Blinding Light. I get no shooting kills. This entire game, I got lots of opportunities for shooting kills. My bows did nothing. I just could not roll the wound with my bows this game. So, Thranduil is knocked off of his elk, and that's way later on in this game. I didn't take very many pictures, apparently. So Thranduil's knocked off his elk, and I move my Rohan heroes up, but round to the flank, and he bum rushes them with his elves. I put them in a dumb spot. When you're moving cavalry heroes forwards, just make sure that they're more than 12 inches away from infantry models. That way they can't rush you and then win a priority and charge you. As it is, he managed to move his elves up within charge range of my Rohan heroes. And I think worse yet, I didn't even have the 3 heroes within range of each other. I think one of them was outside of 6. Anyway, Éomer is out. Éomer is outside of 6. That's right. So Paul takes the next turn priority. Durnhelm and Theodred are safe from the elves. Éomer gets charged by the elves and surrounded, which isn't great. But that's okay, because Durnhelm and Theodred both charge into the same elf on the flank. Gandalf moves up and spends another 2 points of will to transfix Thranduil. Thranduil spends 2 points of will and has to spend 2 points of might on top of that to actually resist the transfix.
All right.
And then in the combat phase, Durnhelm calls a heroic combat with Merry's point of might. Theodred calls a heroic strike. And Thranduil, for some reason, I tried to talk my opponent into striking, elected not to call a heroic strike. Doesn't heroic strike. Gets charged by Theodred and Durnhelm and gets killed this turn. Thranduil just run down. So Paul takes turn 3 priority, and Durnhelm calls another move. Hurin calls a counter move and goes first. And Hurin and the elves mob into Durnhelm and Theodred. Eomer, in the previous combat phase, lost the fight to the elves. I decided not to strike. I probably should have struck. I didn't. The elves won the fight on the Elven Blade roll-off, like they do, and pulled 2 points of Eomer's fate off on Horse Lord, trying to stab his noble steed to death. So Eomer is now still fighting these 3 elves. Dernhelm has a strike-off against Hurin, which she loses, and Merry is killed this turn. Meanwhile, Theodred elects to save his might and wins his fight against some elves. Doesn't kill any of them, though, because he didn't get to charge and doesn't get to rerolls in his charges. So basically, the way this game breaks down is Hurin and the remaining elves fight my Rohan heroes off on one flank, and Alessa and Galadriel start moving up towards me. And at some point, Paul realizes that the elves are going to need some backup. So he sends Galadriel off to provide a little backup for the elves, and Alessa and his warband sort of hold ground and wait. And the remainder of Hurin's warband, which has of course been abandoned by Hurin, who is hunting down my Rohan heroes, the remainder of that warband push up towards my battle line to stop me shooting at him, because I've just been unloading shots into him, and Galadriel's moved away. I still am not getting any wounds, but I guess I was applying enough psychological pressure with 15 bow shots a turn that he was like, I need to engage him. So he pushes up about 12 Warriors of Minas Tirith into my battle lines, and I just surrounded him, and they're Warriors of Minas Tirith with shield, sword and board in front, backed up by Warriors of Minas Tirith with spear and shields. They're fight 3, and I've got my Fountain Court, my Rangers, so I've got the high fight and the numbers. And on the first turn of combat, I won every single fight, pushed him back, didn't get a single kill. On the second turn of combat, we made up for it, and we got 7 kills.
Dang.
None of my heroes are in combat at this point. That was just Warriors of Minas Tirith trapping out of the Warriors of Minas Tirith and beating them down. At which point he realizes, okay, Alessa and your warband now need to push forwards. Galadriel pulls back and leaves Hurin to deal with Theodred. Theodred's the only hero left over there. Hurin did manage to chop down Eowyn in the next turn. I managed to bail Eomer out of trouble with Gandalf. I used a free command to pull one of on the turn where I won priority. Eomer's in the middle of a 3-point trap from 3 elves who have been beating the snot out of him. I commanded one of the elves. It felt like such a waste of Gandalf, but I just needed to get my Rohan hero out of there. I'd successfully saved all of Eomer's might at this point. He hasn't spent any. So I was like, I need to get him out of there. Aragorn's coming my way. My push for his objective has failed because of the way that I let my Rohan heroes get bogged down by these elves. That's okay. I'm just going to kill his leader, break him, and win on those conditions. No problem. So I need to pull Eomer back. So I commanded one of the elves out of the way so that Eomer could basically ride out of the 3-point trap and ride to safety. So we get into some combats in the battle line. Aragorn has finally arrived. He's actually in this picture between Gandalf and Eomer there, because Aragorn rides into combat, and I'd warned him about the Sorcerer's Blast. I was like, hey, look, I just Sorcerer's Blasted Thranduil off of his elk. You need to not put your heroes behind warriors. And he kept setting Aragorn up, and I left it for 3 turns, Sam, and then finally was like, okay, I warned you, and you've left it here for 3 turns. So Aragorn's charging into combat. He's called a move, he's charged into combat, he's engaging my battle line, he's backing up his troops, and they might chop through to my objective, which is being guarded by Denethor. Denethor's cherry tomatoes, Sam, they're not a relic, they're Denethor's cherry tomatoes, and he's eating them while he's watching Warriors of Minas Tirith die, which is what he loved. So we Sorcerer's Blast a Ranger into Aragorn's combat. The whole combat, including my warrior, is knocked over. That's okay. Gandalf charges on into Aragorn. Eomer charges on into Aragorn. Eomer strikes up. Gandalf decides to two-hand and stab with Glamdring, so he's getting +1 to wound, re-rolling 1s. Eomer has lost his sister, so he's getting +1 to wound, and between the two of them, they put 9 wounds on Aragorn. Ooh. Yeah, 5 of those were from Gandalf, which was just brutal. A couple of turns later, the only model left on this flank is Galadriel. Meanwhile, Sam, on the other flank, Theodred is going off. He is surrounded by Hurin, a bunch of elves. This is just before this picture's taken. He's surrounded by Hurin, 2 elves, and 2 spear supports. Hurin is still mounted. Theodred charged this turn. He's got his 3 dice because he charged the mounted cavalry model. Gets a 4 high. Paul rolls a fistful of dice. Hurin at this point is out of might and rolls a 3 high. So Theodred has charged with his first dice. Doesn't get any. Well, his first attack fails to wound the first elf, re-rolls it, gets 2 wounds. Same deal on the second elf. Fails to get a wound, re-rolls it, gets 2 wounds. Next attack, screw it, I'll throw it at Hurin. Kills Hurin's horse, puts a wound on Hurin. Next attack kills that's 3 attacks. The next turn, pretty much the same thing happens. I Paul flubs his roll. Theodred gets the 6, wins the fight, kills Huron on the reroll. Like rerolled failed wounds into 2 wounds on Huron. Huron fails his fate and dies. And like it goes from Theodred surrounded by a bunch of guys to this, with Theodred and 1 warrior of Minas Tirith, who then charges into Theodred and gets chopped down. And then Paul made a pretty big mistake. He's got 2 Knights of Minas Tirith who've been sort of playing sweep. They've been riding around in his backfield. And Theodred has to charge, and I had reminded him of this about 2 turns earlier. And you can see Theodred sitting right next to this big dwarf statue. And the Knights could have moved up in front of Theodred so that he has to charge one of them and move away from Paul's relic. Instead, they move towards their relic, like they're going to go defend it, and actually end up moving outside of Theodred's line of sight so that he can't charge them. So next turn, Theodred just rides off round the backfield and is in a position, I made sure he was outside of 10 of the 2 Knights, and is in a position to pick up the relic. And Theodred is the worst objective grabber. He should not have picked up this relic. But he did. Theodred picks up the relic. He's an expert rider, doesn't even have to get off his horse, and then proceeds to ride. Then the Knights move up into his charge range, charges into the Knights, and chops them to pieces. This game eventually ended after Paul had been broken. You can see that Galadriel is the only model left over in my deployment zone. The rest of the army is pretty much taken off the board. There were like 3 elves running around, and a couple of Knights had run back to try and stop Theodred. But there was really nothing he could do at this point, and it was an 8-0 victory to me.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, an interesting game. I think Paul was also a fairly new player, trying out a weird Yellow Alliance list, which I'm sure there was something with Elessar and Thranduil. I think those 2 heroes can probably do quite well together. I think Galadriel needed to not be in the list.
Yeah.
And he could have had, like, I don't know, the like, all the elves should have had spears and should have been spear supporting the warrior. I don't know. I didn't really like his list. I also don't know that he played it particularly well. So I can't necessarily say that I played this one spectacularly, but
yeah.
a fun game nonetheless.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. So 2 major victories to end the event. You got to tell us how it all ended. What were the placings?
Oh, I couldn't find the placings online, Sam. Let me see if I can pull them up on my past events on Best Coast Pairings. Nope, I'm not a subscriber to Best Coast Pairings, so I can't pull it up. I believe Caleb, my opponent from round 1, came first. I want to say Ted took second. And I can't for the life of me remember who got third, but I was told there was actually a 4-way tie for third place. And it came down to the final tiebreaker, which was victory point difference. And I was one of those players tying for third place. And that if I had actually 12-0'd Ken in round 2, then I would have gotten third. So proves you right, Sam.
Yeah. Oh well.
But I also think you're right in the not beating him into a pulp.
Right. It's
and it would have been one thing, right? Like it's one thing to 12-0 someone if they're playing well and you're just for whatever reason playing better, but he just wasn't having a game, and I just couldn't. Like I couldn't. He had like taken none of my. It's just pulling your models off the board and not killing anything. It's just miserable.
Yeah.
I had to let Thranduil. Like I think Thranduil got to kill Mary, and if I hadn't shattered him and the game ended, he'd have killed Durnhelm next turn. Yeah. Anyway.
Fair enough. Well, almost another podium for you with this list. Before we go, do you have any? Do you want to talk about? So we're almost at an hour. So if you want to save it and talk about it later, we totally can. Or if you want to keep,
I think it's a good moment to chat about it.
But yeah, you've now played 6 games at tournaments with essentially the same list. Are you still feeling this is the list for Nova, or are we making some subtle changes? Are we making wide sweeping changes?
I think we're making wide sweeping changes. I think as much as I really enjoy playing the 3 Rohan heroes with Gandalf, it's a lot of fun. What I have found is that, let's see, there are 6 heroes in the army list, so there are 42 warrior models. It's not enough warrior models to back up the heroes if my opponent has higher fight than me. So if my opponent has higher fight, I just don't have enough warriors to sustain the push that I need for the heroes to do their work. And what I found with the heroes is that one of them will get shut down / killed by my opponent's big hero, and the other 2 will just go run rampant, usually burning all of their resources to kill something big, and then once they're out of might, it's just down to luck, and usually one of them will have will have bad luck and die, and the other one will just be like Theoden in my last game, where he just went nuts and killed a bunch of stuff he shouldn't. Or
So,
honestly, like Dernhelm, like running into Radagast and just pulling all that
right.
stats off of Radagast, probably for 75 points should like it was a great expenditure of 75
Right.
points.
Yeah.
So my feeling is that I need more troops, or I need to have higher fight. So I feel like the Rohan heroes need to go, and we've talked about it a bit off air. And if you're looking for higher fight with a Green Alliance with Gondor, I think you're looking at either fiefdoms or putting Boromir in there. So I think what I'm going to do is it's going to be Boromir.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
just need to decide how I quite want to tweak the list.
yeah, I mean, you could take fiefdoms, right? But that gives you basically easy access to a lot of Fight 4, which isn't really good enough anymore. Or you get a 3 inches of Imra Hill, you get Fight 5. But if you're spending, I think he's, 140 base? Anyway.
I think it's 160 kitted out.
Yeah, so if you're spending that, you're not spending that much more. I guess you're spending 60 more points. But if you take Boromir with the banner, you get a 6-inch banner, you get 3 more might, you get 6 inches of +1 fight, which you already have super easy access to Fight 4, so you're going up to that Fight 5. You also can basically refund yourself 25 points for not taking another banner. And you have a banner now that's Fight 7, Defense 7, and 3 Fate. So
with access to Heroic Defense.
Right, so in scenarios that you're needing to defend a banner, it's way more survivable. Well, arguably more survivable. You have to do less work to make it survive than a regular banner. So,
plus, unless we leave Denethor in there, Imrahil as a hero of legend is going to have to be the army leader, and now you've got your combat hero as your army leader, which is great fun. Don't get me wrong, I love playing Azog, I love playing combat hero army leaders, but it means you're much more likely to give up leader wounds.
Yeah. I mean, I think you would need to leave Denethor, or you essentially leave Denethor in there because you're playing in a veto tournament, so you're never playing the scenarios that like hurt to have Denethor as your leader, and he's a really cheap access to 15 warband slots basically. So
yeah, absolutely. Although with Boromir in there, you're not really hunting for warband slots anymore. So the big thing I need to decide is sort of how I want to run it. I have really been enjoying taking Denethor. At first I thought he was kind of a lame leader, and in a way he is, but he's just a different sort of model to play with. He's got a different role, and you have to play him, especially against, like if Legolas is on the table, he becomes a real challenge to not give up leader wounds, because Legolas, he's got no fate, he's defense 6.
Yeah.
Legolas can pretty much shoot him with impunity. So I think he's just different and fun to play with. The thing I need to decide is I wrote a list that basically just had Gandalf and Boromir as my combat heroes, and I don't think that has enough oomph. When I played Boromir before at Return to Paths of the Dead, I enjoyed playing him, but I felt that as big smashy combat hero goes, he lacks punch.
Yeah.
So I got to decide, do I just throw Theoden back in there? I'd love to just throw Dernhelm back in there, but I can't because he's a minor hero. So do I throw Theoden in there? I actually wrote one the other day that has Faramir in it. And for what you pay for Faramir, Theoden is definitely better money spent. But I was able to get it up to 50, I think it was 52 models, and keep Faramir and all the other, and Denethor and Gandalf and Madril and Boromir in there. And it felt better on theme. We got the full family. Faramir with a lance. He's only 2 attacks, but he can get some work done.
But what about Hurin with the sword? Because he's +1 to wound all the time. He doesn't even need to charge. Plus, it shores up some of your concern about playing like a Legolas, because if Denethor goes down, then you basically have to kill Denethor and Hurin to get points.
Yeah, no, that's very true. My main argument for Faramir over Hurin is Faramir's got 2 fates and defense 7 to Hurin's defense 6 and 1 fate.
Sure.
But they are you're right, they're very similar heroes in that regard.
Interesting. Of course, you could just take a couple bolt throwers for your punch, but I do think everyone and their mother
is going to be blinding light at 1,000 points.
Everyone and their mother is going to have blinding light, but
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, interesting. We will have to wait for a little while to see what you end up playing for Nova. And speaking of waiting for a little while, we're not sure what the next episode is going to be. There should be one 2 weeks after this. There is a slim chance that we will have to skip a release date, but I don't think that will happen. But it will probably be a different episode, as neither of us are going to an event between now and the time we'd need to release the episode. So yeah, something to keep your ears and eyes open for, which will be something slightly different. Yeah, and I suppose
until then,
yeah. Thank you for listening, and please consider checking out our Patreon. And if you haven't, subscribe to YouTube and do all that social media-y stuff.
Oh, you know what I didn't say, Sam? You brought it up. The Patreon's a big thank you to all of you who have subscribed to our Patreon. We do really appreciate your continued support. You are keep the lights on here at Gondor Calls for Ale.
Yeah, you are, as they say, the bee's knees.
The cat's meow.
Thank you for listening to Gondor Calls for Ale. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. We, at Gondor Calls for Ale, are officially sponsored by the Baron of Dice, the producer of premium wargaming dice. These beautifully hand-swirled resin dice have no micro bubbles and are therefore perfectly balanced. With over 3,000 variants and unique designs, nearly every tabletop gaming system is represented. So check out the description of this episode for a link and a discount code. Go buy yourself some new dice and let the good times roll. We at Gondor Calls for Ale are not associated with Games Workshop, New Line Cinema, or the Tolkien Estate. We hope we have not misrepresented or offended anyone. These recordings are strictly recollections of games we've played and are not commentaries on the character or competence of our opponents. They are intended purely for entertainment, and we hope they will be taken as such. You can find us on Patreon, see the link in the description. Supporting Gondor Calls for Ale there helps us continue to produce these episodes. You can find us on Instagram at Gondor_calls_for_ale. Feel free to send us a message there. Or on Facebook as Gondor Calls for Ale, another great place to send us a message. Or you can send us an email at gondorcallsforale@gmail.com. As Boromir, Captain of the White Tower, once said, remember today, listener, today this episode was good.